Former CEO of Abercrombie Fitch, Mike Jeffries, and two of his business associates were arrested today as part of a sex trafficking investigation. The arrests come after years of sexual misconduct allegations made in civil lawsuits and the media from men who said the former CEO lured them with promises of modeling work and then pressed them into sexual acts. For example, one civil lawsuit filed in New York last year accused Abercrombie of allowing Jeffries to run a sex trafficking organization during his 22 years there. Specifically, it said Jeffries had modeling scouts scouring the internet for victims and that some prospective models became sex trafficking victims. Following the suit and an in-depth report by the BBC, Abercrombie said it hired an outside law firm to conduct an independent investigation. The BBC report included a dozen men who described being at events involving sex acts that were staged by Jeffries and his partner at his home and also at various hotels.
An attorney for Jeffries has said, quote, "We will respond in detail to the allegations after the indictment is unsealed and when appropriate, but plan to do so in the courthouse, not the media." Meanwhile, Brooklyn-based U.S. Attorney Breon Peace and FBI officials are scheduled to hold a press conference later today. Yikes.
It is, yeah, it's definitely a yikes. There's been a lot of reporting on this guy Jeffries for many years, a lot of media reports on the culture at Abercrombie. There was that documentary of, yeah, it was a very sexualized environment, back in a more less sexualized media in general. Their marketing was, outside the norm. Now that's kind of just the norm anywhere. I will say, and maybe this is going to be a very unpopular take from both of you and from all of the viewers, I do start to roll my eye, like everything is being rounded up to sex trafficking. Like it can be bad. It can be certainly bad business practices and somewhat exploitative, but they're not saying that he didn't like chain people to a radiator and force them to... Well, but that's not, the nature is he promised them, well, are they underage?
Yeah, that's what they claimed in the thing.
In the documentary.
No, that's what they stated in this.
Well, if it's underage, then yes, it's sex trafficking. But if it's not underage and it's like you were promised a job or an opportunity and you did something stupid, I don't know that that's sex trafficking.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see what the indictment actually says when it's unsealed. But there is an interesting connection here, which is that Abercrombie & Fitch was purchased by Les Wexner back in 1988, and he was a close friend of Jeffrey Epstein. And it was Wexner who installed Jeffries as the CEO in 1992. So that gets my conspiracy brain going a little bit.
Maybe Epstein, Jeffries, and P. Diddy were all hanging out somewhere. Do we have any evidence of that?
And this is something that they've been... not just these sex trafficking rings, which clearly are rings and organized and communities where this could very likely be the case, especially because Wexner was so problematic.
Right.
But also in Canada, there was a former fashion mogul, Peter Nygaard, who was like the biggest fashion mogul, and he was just convicted in a sex trafficking situation with underage minors. There's, of course, the story of Harrods, Al Fayed in the UK, where now there are almost 250 allegations the BBC has reported just today. This has been going on for years in the UK. This is obviously an industry-related problem. And then we look at the Diddy situation in which clearly there was some sort of trafficking situation and we haven't even learned any of the details beside what is put out in the public. I mean, there were the celebrities involved, there were folks recruiting. Yeah. Obviously, that happened with Epstein. In this situation, it said that his partner was the person recruiting young folks to come and work with them or travel with them. I gotta tell you, I worked at Abercrombie, and I was 18 years old. It was like all the cool kids were going there, and if you got a job at Abercrombie, you like felt so seen. And if you were the front of the store, you were like considered the prettier ones, and if you're the back of the store, you weren't. And I got put in the back of the store, and it like traumatized me. And then they wanted me to like lift boxes. I was like, I'm an 18-year-old, like I'm 105 pounds. I can't lift boxes. But when I saw the documentary, though, there was a culture there, and I highly recommend people see it. It wasn't just that it was sexualizing young kids. I mean, they were recruiting teenagers.
Okay, but nobody has to work there. Like it's not, you're not a prisoner. And you said underage, but I've just looked at like 5 stories now on these new allegations, and no one is saying underage. They're saying men. And that's a big difference to me because underage people cannot consent to sex. So yes, that counts as sex trafficking. Absolutely criminal. These may still be criminal matters, but at some point, like adults have to make their own decisions. And if you did something you regret and you thought that was going to turn into a job or something, like maybe this is just me. Isn't that on you to any degree?
I actually agree with you. It's unethical, but probably not illegal. right?
Yeah, and it might be bad. It
Like
might be if the
making
board wants to oust the
promises.
head of the business for doing this,
Like
100%.
making promises
Sure.
to people, or like, I mean, this
And that can be a civil
this
issue,
is like
for sure.
This is like if a guy tells you that he loves you and he doesn't mean it, and then you sleep with him because you think he's in love with you, or he tells you
Feminists are going to make that illegal.
Like,
Unless
that's
you're employed by
unethical.
them, why is it bad that Olivia Nuzzi has a relationship after she reports, and yet?
But we're not saying she's going to go to jail.
Well,
We're
yeah,
just-
it's
you were just
unethical
saying-
and
yeah.
unprofessional, so you should lose your job.
Right.
But
But
should
hang on,
you go
hang on.
to jail if you
Right.
make false
they
promises
were
in exchange
they
for
were
sex
hiring
advocates, so.
people that were underage, teenagers, right? And so I think that's where the allegations of being underage is part of this, right? So in that documentary, you'll see that they were targeting high schoolers. There was a whole operation how they recruited them online and in person. I mean, I was shocked that they had this whole mall operation where they would find girls, like young girls and young boys, to come in because they looked good. And that today I think would be seen very unethical and a sign of something worse. I don't think that the authorities, both in the UK and here, would be putting forth charges of human trafficking unless they had something. We haven't seen the indictment. But again, like, why don't we have the same outrage for this as we do with Diddy? And that's what we did not know a lot about Diddy a few weeks ago. We barely had anything. And yet now, except for the Cassie video, but that didn't mean that he was trafficking people. Now we have more information.
I mean, even in the Diddy case, I want more information before I just assert that everything is sex trafficking. Again, it could be exploitative and criminal, and there's a lot more detail in that. And again, if it's underage people, then yes, Justin Bieber, underage.
Right.
Usher, underage at the time. So yes, I have no dispute, and if in this case, people who are underage of the consent were being taken advantage of sexually, then yes, that certainly can be a criminal matter. I'm not actually seeing that alleged specifically in this new reporting about why they arrested him. So I have a little bit of like, is it just the word it's always trafficking now. I initially thought that was something we reserved for like,
Flying.
Filipino women
Yeah.
smuggled into the country and have to serve as sex workers or they get beaten or something. Like
sex trafficking.
yeah.
Human sex trafficking.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just now. I mean, Epstein was tried for this, 20 years ago.
Yeah, but again, that was underage girls.
Underage girls, exactly, and the Lolita Express.
Yeah.
And how many people were in that Lolita Express, let's just remind folks, that have gotten away scot-free?
Yeah. I went to the mall over the weekend in the Pentagon City Mall.
Oh, yeah?
And there was, I thought there was what was the other one? Hollister. It had a
Yeah. It was
similar
related to it,
branding.
yeah.
And I'm like on the third floor, so I was on the first floor, and I'm looking up. I was hoping it was a Hollister. Went up there, it was not, but it was actually a Dungeons & Dragons specialty store. So
Well,
I was
perfect
perfectly
for you.
Perfect for me. I was very happy there.
Not a similar look by any means.
No, for a totally different cast of young people, the geeks and the jocks. All right, we have more Rising coming up. Is Liz Cheney really helping Kamala Harris during this vast media tour she's engaged in? We'll debate that. Stay tuned.